Thank you, Jill, and my co-host. And I want to first of all uh, talk about this day. What great gratitude I have for just even being here with you. But in my own practice, every morning, uh, I'll start out with a gratitude practice. The Tibetans taught me that, and the first person I'm grateful to is my own mother. Yeah, Grandma Betty to my kids, through just mom to me, and she every day I start thanking her because you know it's why I'm grateful that you're here. She was present with me for 9 months, and you can't undervalue that. You can't undervalue that. Any of you who have ever had to do that, but that's why I value you. That's the ultimate contribution to this thing is your presence. But a mother, uh, an actual birth mother, she carries, she's present in ways that there's a metaphor there for the spiritual journey in terms of presence too, to be fully embodied. When my mother was carrying me, she was fully embodied during that time, probably sometimes too much, as any of you might know that experience. And that's also part of this journey too, is that it's got to be embodied, and you have to be present always to the body. And I, like many of you, I grew up Catholic, and in some ways in the church I grew up with, it couldn't have been more disembodied in a way. A body of Christ, body of Christ, body of Christ, but it was mostly, it was theology. It wasn't even theology, it was nonology. That's what the nuns knew, is what I was taught. And it's a bit too small. That God became a bit too small for me. And I just threw the whole thing out, of course, but came back to it. And Zen guys brought me back to it. I'm always grateful for my Buddhist guys, my first master, Suzuki. So my mother, first of all. Then I want to pay tribute to Jill. Jill was the co-creator of this thing. She was letting you in while I was going to get a drink of water and assembling this place. She's here as backup. She takes over when I can't be here, so that keeps the whole thing running. But it was her idea. I'd say we co-created this thing, so I'm always grateful to her to be here. And she's an incredible mother in her own right, physical birth mother, taking care of Russell for all these years, sort of on her own. Well, definitely on her own. And then my wife, who Elizabeth's here. Thanks to her. She's in the lazy boy, by the way. This meditation period is not going to be really legit here for her, But Loose Leaf Hollow would not be here. It was a project that we co-created, and actually I would have pulled the plug on it years ago had she not encouraged me to keep going with it. So those three mothers. But then I really want to explore the fact that we all have that archetype. So when you get into Jung and you get into just these deep structure, as you would say, of everybody's personality, the Tibetans take that seriously. I'm looking here at Elizabeth and Mary Wright, Nick's here, and my great friend Mike Rafferty from Austin. The Tibetans would see you guys as all mother beings, and because they have this ultra long view, which really is eternity. We talked about eternity in grade school, but it just was a hell of a long time that you might not want to spend in hell. But they really see it as that, and they see that they would say, "You've been everybody's mother." From a Tibetan point of view, I was probably all these guys' mothers, and they were all my mother. In previous, why people actually become your friends in life. They could have been your mother in the previous life, that kind of thing. But if you look at all beings as mother beings, you got to be kind. You just got to be kind. That really goes for all forms of life. You end up like St. Francis. He was like a Tibetan, it was a Tibetan medieval Italian mystic, because he saw everything as his brother's, brother, sun, sister, moon, everything. He saw everything as like a mother being. and he was just kind to everything. The wolf, he tamed the wolf. Yeah. So I read the poem I've got. It's only 47 words long. Every once in a while, I put the word count on because it started out a lot much longer than that, but that's my process. And so I'm going to read it to you a couple times just to let you get it through the year. It'll be in the mail out tomorrow. Let me see. And it's called Your Mother's Day, because I really want you to embrace this day and this sense of this archetype of being mothering all of life. Okay. So anyway, here's the poem. With one sacred breath, your oceanic womb births infinite blessing in waves of darkness and light. We have arrived. We are home. In the here, in the now. Women and men, gay and straight, both midwife and mother, in this communion we dwell. With one sacred breath, your oceanic womb births infinite blessing in waves of darkness and light. We have arrived. We are home in the here and now. Women and men, gay and straight, both midwife and mother, in this communion we dwell. Yeah, let me just open that up a little bit for you. With one sacred breath. We talk a lot about it, if you've been around for the last 2 years, about just the sacredness of breath. And if you go back to Genesis, that was the start of the human race. The divine breathed in through through nostrils that he formed out of dust. I mean, this is all metaphor. You can't take this stuff literally, the way you did in grade school, but it was the sacred breath, and then it became a human being. I mean, this incarnation is what happens between the in-breath and our last out-breath. As Sogo Rinpoche says, he says, nobody ends their life at an in-breath. Yeah. So the breath is so central to any form of contemplation or meditation, but to living itself. Hopefully over the time you start to break apart the wall between some kind of spiritual practice and your life, or even your life and the divine. I contend that any statement with the G word in it, you could replace it with the L word. And I have had people come here who are either agnostic or atheists. I had one who was atheist. She walked in for the retreat. She looked around. She says, I think I might be in the wrong place here. And I said, well, why is that? She says, I don't believe in God. And I said, well, do you believe in life? And she said, I think so. And I said, well, you're in the right place. Because I think any statement, if you say God is love, life is love. You can put the L word in there. And I really think that works. That works. So the word, don't let the word throw you off. Joseph Campbell said, he said, what people are really looking for in religion is a sense of being more alive. And if whatever practice you have is doing that, stick with it. If it's not doing that, So with one sacred breath, your oceanic womb births infinite blessing, waves of darkness and light. That's actually it's basically playing on the first line of the Lord's Prayer, so called in Aramaic. My rendering from there, but I want you to own it. It's your Mother's Day with one sacred breath that you take. Just it makes it sacred if you know it's sacred. If you know you're breathing in and know you're breathing out. Fact is, we do it all the time, whether we know it or not. But what makes it sacred is to know how important that is. And so when we're going to switch, in 10 minutes, we'll go from the talk to just sitting in silence and you're breathing. That's, we'll try to drop everything else besides just sitting in the silence and the breathing. Everything else gets in the way. So, but it's a sacred thing to breathe. And then if you're conscious of it, if you know you're breathing in and breathing out, if you're aware of it, each breath can be a blessing. This world needs to be blessed. Some people, I meet people who have never been blessed by anybody. And they've never felt blessed. They were blessed by their mother. They're blessed with every breath, but they don't feel blessed. They don't feel this. Rumi said, he said, most people see this universe as suffering or woeful. He saw it as graceful and blessed. How you see is what you see. I mean, that's a phenomenology like sort of rule, and it explains a lot of things about politics and everything else. How you see is what you see. So part of it is realizing the fact that how blessed we are to even be here, to have to have this life, and can we bless one another? You're blessing everyone here is blessing each other right now. Maybe not consciously, and you don't have to say the words, but you're blessing people with your presence, with your attention. Say, infinite blessing and waves of darkness and light. And everybody knows we think blessings are only this great stuff that happens to you, but blessing is both light and dark. Blessing can be it can be fierce grace, dark, or it can be a gentle grace. Everybody thinks that's what blessing, but there's those really dark things that happen to your life that are a blessing in disguise when they happen. If you have some kind of practice of looking deeper, if you don't look deeper, you only end up with the disguise, Rumi would say. Rumi was a master. That's a Sufi term, blessing in disguise. They worked it through Europe, from North Africa to France. That's where that comes from. They see everything as a blessing in disguise. Pretty well disguised. Cancer, your spouse dies, you screw up, lose your job, lose your own health. It's hard to see some things. They're very well disguised, and you could live and die, and never get beneath the disguise. Rumi is one of the great guides for that. So, just the breath is a blessing. Just every breath you're taking now. Pay attention to the breath as you listen to this. Just notice the breath coming in and out. Of course, in the traditions, many traditions, what they call a sacred breath is called a circular breath sometimes. You can really practice with this, breathing in through the nose. And deep and just gradual, with no hurry, with no pressure, but filling yourself with good fresh air, and then breathing out through the mouth. You look at the Cleveland Clinic or some of the other, but I know the Cleveland Clinic has a thing called pursed lip breathing, which is just the sacred breath. That's what it was for Jesus. They had the word in Aramaic for it, Alaha Ruha, the sacred breath, breathing in through the nose, out through the mouth. With pursed lips. Pursed lips is a very interesting thing. You can check out the Cleveland Clinic. I don't have that kind of time now, but they have the scientific things of what happens when you breathe that way, how you're shifting neural pathways from sort of high anxiety to start to rest. Yeah. Now the second part. So the first part I sort of stole from Jesus and worked it. It's my take on the first line of the Lord's Prayer. The second part is very much comes from mindfulness tradition, especially Thich Nhat Hanh. We have, as you're breathing, we have arrived. We are home in the here, in the now. That image is from a Thich Nhat Hanh Gatha. We have arrived. We are home in the here, in the now. Uh, it's how he could travel the world, and he was always home. It's how the Dalai Lama is always home, wherever he is talking or whatever. There's a true sense, and the Sufis are the great teachers of this, that the thing we long for is that feeling, home. Where is home? See, where is home? If you don't find it somehow here, you're always looking for it. You know, it could be a power, a profit, possessions, prestige, this yacht, my 3 summer homes. I mean, you can play that game. Lives of the rich and famous do it. We know how happy they end up. They're never enough if you look for it in those things. But if the promise of the contemplative traditions is you already have it, and it's inside. Buddha was the first guy to say, hey, this is an inside game. You can spend your whole life rearranging the furniture in the front room of your house till it gets just right. Never going to happen. It hadn't happened at that time. He had his religion, all the Brahmins and all the religious guys, and there were war, and he was stuck in the middle of a war as he grew up in northern India. And he said he was the first guy to say, and he was a real scientist. He said, just maybe we're looking for it in the wrong place. I'm not out here, because none of this stuff ever stays the same. Every creative thing is breaking down, and it arises for a while. That includes us. You could do a time-lapse photography of your own life, just like you see a bean growing up and then shrivels down. That's created things. That's created things. And so if you're trying to get a stable feeling of home there, scientifically, he figured out, he said, well, maybe if we took awareness and consciousness and looked inside, which was novel. Nobody had done that prior to that, as far as I could tell. He was a pure scientist. He said, maybe then we could find out why we're sort of always a little dissatisfied or a lot dissatisfied. That was brilliant. That was brilliant. 500 years later, Jesus had the same view, Middle Eastern context, the kingdom of heaven is within you. Well, that didn't make any sense to any of those guys. None of his parables really made any sense, because he was turning everything up on top of its head, just like the Buddha was, his own version of it. He was a poet. It was metaphor after metaphor, because you can't really say what awareness is. It's a mystery. You can't say what God is. It's a mystery. You can't say what love is. It's mysterious. It's just like the quantum physicists. You can't put your finger on it. And even the astrophysicists, it's too big. You can't define it in words. So God, like Jesus, went for metaphor. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed sown by a woman. That made absolutely no sense. As a matter of fact, all of those pissed off the religious guys, because mustard was, you couldn't plant it. It was prohibited in Deuteronomy. So he knew what he was doing when he was using shocking symbols to get actually to fry the circuits of their brains and what they learned, to say, something mysterious here. The kingdom of heaven is within. He also said the kingdom of heaven is among us. Say, what you're looking for is found right here, right now, in the here, in the now. Yeah. And then the end of it is my own thing there. The beginning is the Thich Nhat Hanh, and I like that a lot. We have arrived, we are home, in the here, in the now. He says, and I think rightly so, that life is only experienced. You're only alive in the here and the now. if I could show you the 24-hour readout of second by second of how often your mind took you into the future or into the past, and how the amount of time you spent in the here, in the now, we'd all be mortified, I'm sure, based on my own experience. I'm 72. How much time of those 72 years have I spent actually in the here, in the now, seeing what's here, smelling what's here, tasting what's here? You know, you cannot live in the future. You cannot live in the past, which is exactly why the breath is a great metaphor where I started with it, because you cannot breathe in the future. You cannot breathe in the past. So we're talking about being more alive. It needs to somehow inhabit your body. I would call it embodied awareness. No, that's true. That's really what we're trying to do more and more. Body of Christ, body of Christ, body of Christ. You went out and got the wafer, but wasn't that great? Because the change comes if you can actually go into the depths with that whole idea. The Buddha, the body of the Buddha, the body of the Sangha, the body of the Dharma, the three bodies in Buddhism. They're talking about something very deep, and you are all that. So in the end, I wanted to say, in the here and the now, women and men, gay and straight, trans, whatever, we're starting to come into that consciousness, and that consciousness is getting a lot of pushback. That that it's just not rich white men that are the important species on this planet, and everybody else is a subspecies, But I think in terms of being a mother being, women and men, there's a lot of women who just said they didn't have a baby. My grandmother didn't have a baby. She was our grandmother for my mother, and she was actually a Sarantanello, but she mothered those kids. She mothered all of us, grandkids too, but she never had a child of her own. It didn't matter. She was an incredible mother being. She's on my altar there above the Dalai Lama in Merton for that reason. She is one of my gurus for sure. So women and men, gay and straight, both midwife and mother. That's sort of a little puzzling line. It was even puzzling for me when it came out on the page, but I think that's our deal. It's up for us to birth that one being. That's our job. We're all given to birth one being, who we're uniquely meant to be. My favorite line from Jesus is not in the canonical Gospels. It's in the what they call the fifth Gospel, the Gospel of Thomas. Some of you know this. Thomas was, he was curious. He became the doubting Thomas, but he was really looking into things. He was a little more like a scientist, and he was questioning this poet, and they expected Jesus to save everybody's bacon. They were laying all this stuff on him. He's the Messiah. He was going to take over, and everything was going to be great. It's like the belief that Republicans win, everything's going to be great, or Democrats win, everything's going to be great. Never going to happen. Jesus said, if you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. But if you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. It's in an actual form, it's an injunction. If you bring forth what is within you, which he's talking about who you're meant to be, your unique self, with no parts shaved off. We all had parts of us that we had to shave off growing up just to survive. But who are you really? And what are you meant to do on this planet? How are you meant to bless these people? That's what Jesus is talking about. If you bring that forth, in that sense, we are all carrying that for a long time. And it's up to us to birth it. If you do that, if you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. That's salvation, because what are we here for? If, otherwise we're playing a role on the stage, as Shakespeare would say. Amount to nothing, but let's sound and fury amounting to nothing if you're not you, whoever that is. We got Hollywood Squares here. We play, we got 30 people here or whatever. It's not one size fits all. There's 30 unique ways of blessing the planet, 30 unique talents. Incredible. But if you don't, that's what the journey is to birth that. Who is that? And there's a gestation period. For me, I've been doing this work 50 years. I still don't know who that is. I'm not sure that's the point of knowing it up here. It's actually you eventually you be it, birth it. And that might take more than one lifetime for me. I'm not that quick. So both midwife and mother, that's you. That's part of the archetype. And then finally, in this communion, we dwell. And so we go now to where we'll sit, and we'll actually sit in silence and do this work of birthing. This is training. If you see Ted Lasso when he learns about soccer, it's not practice, it's training. They call it training. And this is training. This is birth training. When we were going to have Aaron as my first kid, we trained in breathing. So this is not by the board. This is essential to just sit, be conscious of your breathing, and let yourself settle down. Stop chasing your own tail. Stop thinking it's out there and settle in. You see, that's basic training in this thing, and then gradually, those parts of yourself that need to be birthed will come. In this communion, we dwell. That's the one thing that I really cherished about my education by 12 years of Dominicans was they believed in a communion of saints. They believed that there was a bunch of people who had done this and who were still around in some form, and they were in your corner. Because it's not an easy thing to do to birth your true self. It is not an easy thing to do. And if you get to be my age, and you know that that you haven't done it yet, it gets to be a little tense because we know, 72, at any age you can go out. And it's nice to know that, you got another go round. The Tibetan view, which I buy, and the Christian view, it's life's eternal. Once you're born, you never die. So you don't have to do it in a lifetime, but still, what are we doing here? What are you doing here? Power, profit, possessions, prestige, doesn't amount to anything in the end if you haven't birthed that. That's what Jesus was saying. He said, but if you do not birth what is within you, what you do not birth will destroy you. Waste of a life. So that's a sort of hard saying. He's challenging you. So now it's a little longer talk than 47 words. It was the longest talk I've done in a while. So we're going to shift over into contemplation now, into silence. So Jill will end this talk.